Welcome to the RC Stories Garage. Anyone who has an SCX10 III chassis knows that dig shifting is frustrating and the stock micro-servo sucks. The 2-speed shift servo does okay because it's not subjected to as much strain. The dig servo, however, struggles because you shift in and out of dig when the transmission gears are under the most load. I've purchased several third-party micro-servos with the intent of replacing my stock dig servo with something more powerful. However, even though these servos fit in the stock location, they don't work with the stock servo saver. Now, since the servo saver is also the shift linkage, this is a problem. And I wouldn't want to run without a servo saver because of the aforementioned load on the system. The dig shift mechanism has 90 degrees of engagement, so there is a good chance that the gears won't mesh when the servo first attempts a shift. The servo saver gives the gears a chance to align without breaking the servo in the meantime. It would be so much better if we could use a full-size servo for dig shifting. The Vanquish VS410 VFD twin transmission uses a full-size servo, and it shifts under full load without hesitation. Partly this is because the shift mechanism has 30 degrees of engagement, so it's out of alignment less of the time. But also, a full-size servo just has so much more power to overcome friction in the system. So, I started thinking, can I fit a full-size, low-profile shift servo in the SCX10 III chassis, and with very little modification? The answers are yes and yes. In this video, I will show you how I installed a full-size, low-profile servo as a dig shifter on my SCX10 III chassis. I used a Reef's 299 LP servo, though other 1/10 scale low-profile servos may work. I will cover the following installation steps. 1. Remove the stock micro-servo and plan to reroute any wiring that might be in the way. 2. Install a servo saver on the new servo. 3. Measure the location of the new servo and drill mounting holes. 4. Mount the new servo. 5. Measure and assemble a shift link. 6. Install the shift link. 7. Connect the servo and adjust the endpoints. You will need the following supplies: a full-size low-profile servo, such as the Reef's 299 LP, a servo saver to fit your servo output, such as the Hot Racing Rift servo saver, universal servo mounts, such as those by RPM Racing, 2 3mm angled rod ends and pivot balls, such as those for the new Axial UTB-18 Capra, a 3mm by 16mm grub screw, or, as I did, cut a longer screw, 2 3mm by 12mm button head screws, a 2.5mm by 14mm flathead screw. You will need the usual tools, specifically a 1.5mm and a 2mm hex driver, a drill and a drill bit, either a metric 3mm or the nearest imperial equivalent, measuring and marking devices such as a ruler or calipers, pencil, scribe, or center punch. The first step is to remove the stock micro-servo. My solution allows you to keep the large rear-mounted battery tray, but you will need to clear any wiring or electronics from the passenger side slider between the receiver box and battery tray. The second step is to install a servo saver on the new servo. Make sure you center the servo first by plugging it into your receiver and zeroing out any trim adjustment. I used quite possibly the tallest servo saver I could find. It is meant as an aftermarket option for the Axial Rift, but it feels beefy and it has adjustable tension. It seems to activate on the lightest setting. It has a bit of slop, which would be a problem for steering, but at full lock, as at the shifting endpoints, compression removes any play. The slop could be removed with a judiciously placed grub screw, but I haven't bothered. If you're using another style of servo saver, you may need to account for its different dimensions by mounting the servo closer to the frame rail or higher on the mounting posts. Which brings us to the next step. The SCX10 III Jeep JLU has about 45mm of clearance between the slider surface and the bottom of the body interior. This is the height limit we are working with. Coincidentally, the receiver box is about 38 millimeters installed. So as long as your installation is below this height, you should be okay. The early Bronco has about 40 millimeters of clearance between the slider and the body interior. However, the stock 2-in-1 receiver will likely need to be repositioned or exchanged. Mounting it on its side and laterally all the way forward might do the trick. I plan to upgrade my early Bronco to a Hobbywing Fusion Pro instead. Due to the height restriction, the low-profile servo must be installed laying down. We need side-to-side room for the servo saver and front-to-back room for the shifting link. I want to keep the rear battery tray, and we need room for the wires entering the receiver box. Also, since we are screwing the servo mount posts to the slider, be aware that the stock sliders have a lot of protrusions on the bottom that could interfere with the screws. With the Reef's 299 LP servo, and assuming the use of UTB-18 link rod ends, I found that I could center the forward mounting hole between two ribs on the underside of the slider. The second hole, located 48 millimeters rearward, cleared another rib. Both holes were drilled 11 millimeters laterally from the edge of the slider. The Reef's 299 LP does not rub on the body, and the servo saver clears the 2-speed shift mechanism by about half a millimeter. Screw the servo mounts to the servo using the height holes that allow the servo saver to clear the chassis rail. Then place this unit on the slider to mock up its position. Measure carefully both the location of the mounting screw holes and the distance center to center between the servo horn and the shift lever. The latter distance will be about 32 millimeters horizontally. After you have measured 2, 3, and maybe 4 times, mark and drill the holes in the sliders. It's a good idea to use a center punch or scribe to mark the hole locations to keep the drill bit from skating on the surface. I start with a smaller bit and then enlarge the hole to the actual size afterwards. I would drill from the underside, as this lets you see the ribs we are trying to avoid. We are now ready to mount the servo. Since the posts are already installed on the servo, it's simply a matter of screwing the posts to the slider. Now we need to verify the link length. To do this, make sure the servo is centered. Now, pull the shift lever out so the dig is in the neutral position. The rear wheels are not locked nor engaged with the transmission. This usually means that the flats on the shift push rod are fully exposed. The shifter is now also in the center position. Measure the straight line distance center to center between the servo saver hole and the shift lever hole. This will be the length of the shift link. I recommend using UTB-18 rod ends for this purpose. They mount to a 3 mm thread, whereas most 1/10 scale rod ends are meant for a 4 mm thread. The UTB-18 rod ends are also shorter than most 1/10 rod ends, meaning you can make a shorter link. A set of rod ends includes plastic pivot balls. My shift link needed to be 32 mm long. Using 2 angled rod ends, it had an offset of about 6 mm. This meant there was 0 distance between the rod ends when assembled. I simply measured the depth of the rod end hole, which was 8 mm, and then cut off the head of a 16 mm button head screw. If you have an appropriately long grub screw, you can use that instead. Screw both rod ends onto the threaded rod at opposing angles. Install pivot balls in each rod end. This is your link, which can be lengthened a few millimeters if necessary. Now install the shift link. Screw it to your servo saver with an appropriately long 3 mm button head screw. The other end attaches to the shifter arm via a 2.5 mm flathead screw. Don't over-tighten this screw, as you risk deforming the pivot ball or stripping the shift lever. Plug the new shift servo into an auxiliary channel on your receiver, but don't turn on your receiver or ESC yet. Instead, turn on your transmitter. I assume you already have dig control configured, so I'll skip the basic setup. However, it is likely that the stock micro-servo and the new full-size servo have different throws, so we will need to set new endpoints. Start by setting the endpoints for the auxiliary channel very low, say 15%. Then turn on the receiver and test the dig shifter. Keep in mind that you will need to rotate the transmission and rear wheels a bit to get the shift mechanism to align and get the full throw from the shifter. Set the left and right endpoints so that the shift mechanism is fully engaged, but the servo is not binding at either end of the shift. That's it. Put the truck on the ground to test it out. Dig should engage and disengage quickly, even under moderate load. Keep in mind that you probably should be shifting in and out of dig while the motor is turning. If everything is working properly, you can go ahead and clean up your wiring. I found that smaller wires could still run under the servo, but everything else had to be routed across the chassis near the forward brace, above the transmission bell housing. Okay, let's do a quick summary. First, we cleared some room for our new, larger dig shift servo. Then we located and drilled mounting holes on the slider. After mounting the new servo and servo saver, we manufactured and installed a custom short link. Finally, we set up the endpoints of the new servo. Now, it's time to get out on the rocks and have fun. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful. Subscribe for more build tips and run videos, and share with your friends.